A police officer unleashes his K-9 on a defenseless pregnant woman during a routine stop. But when she reveals who she really is, everything changes in an instant. You won't believe what happens next. This isn't just another story about abuse of power. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly things can spiral when those who are supposed to protect us lose sight of their duty. Today's story involves a routine traffic stop that turns into a nightmare for an innocent black woman. But as terrifying as the situation becomes, what she reveals about herself shocks everyone involved. Before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories that challenge injustice and shine a light on untold truths. Also, after subscribing the channel, comment down where in world you are watching from. A normal day quickly spirals into a nightmare for Tasha, a pregnant black woman who's just trying to make it to her doctor's appointment. She's driving carefully, checking her watch, anxious but hopeful she won't be late. But just as she's about to merge onto the highway, flashing blue and red lights suddenly flood her rearview mirror. Her heart sinks. A routine traffic stop, no big deal, right? At least that's what she tells herself as she pulls over, trying to stay calm. The officer, a white man in his late 40s, approaches her car. His name tag reads Officer Matthews. His face is stone cold, his eyes steely and unfeeling. There's no warmth, no professionalism, just hostility. Tasha rolls down her window, already sensing that this isn't going to go well. License and registration? That's what she expects to hear. But no. Instead, his first words are gruff and aggressive. "What's the hurry?" Tasha blinks, taken aback by his tone. She forces a smile, trying to remain polite. "I'm on my way to a doctor's appointment. I'm pregnant, and I need to." "Step out of the vehicle." Officer Matthews interrupts, his voice sharp, almost as if he didn't hear or didn't care about her explanation. Tasha hesitates, confused. She hasn't done anything wrong. So why is he acting like this? Her eyes dart nervously toward the K-9 dog at his side. The animal is growling low, teeth bared, almost like it's waiting for permission to strike. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asks, her voice now trembling slightly. Matthews doesn't answer her question. Instead, he grips the leash tighter, the dog's growl growing louder. "I asked you to step out of the car." At this point, Tasha's hands are shaking. This isn't right. She's never been in trouble with the law, never had a run-in with the police, and certainly never felt this type of raw fear. Something about this situation is all wrong. The tension in the air is thick, like a storm cloud ready to burst. This doesn't feel like a routine stop, Tasha thinks. Why is he treating me like I've done something horrible? She glances at her belly, now painfully aware of her unborn child's presence. She needs to stay calm for the baby. But staying calm is becoming harder by the second, especially when Officer Matthews isn't asking for her license or registration. He's not concerned with typical protocol. Instead, his questions are veering into uncomfortable territory. "Where are you really going? Who are you meeting?" Matthews demands, leaning closer, his voice dripping with suspicion. Tasha frowns. "I just told you, I'm going to my doctor's appointment. Why are you? Do you have any weapons on you? Drugs? Anything you shouldn't have?" He cuts her off again, ignoring her completely. This is when Tasha's fear spikes. His line of questioning isn't just unprofessional, it's predatory. He's already decided she's guilty of something. But of what? She racks her brain, wondering why this officer is treating her like a criminal. What did she do to deserve this? Little does she know, Officer Matthews had already made up his mind the moment he saw her behind the wheel. In his eyes, she wasn't just another driver. She was a threat. A black woman driving a nice car, on her way to who knows where. That was all the justification he needed. He wasn't interested in her story. He was interested in making an example out of her, and he had the power to do it. She didn't realize it at the time, but this officer had already decided she was a threat, and he was ready to prove it. Matthews continues to press Tasha, his accusations growing more outlandish with each passing second. "You're hiding something," he snarls, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Tasha can hardly believe what she's hearing. Her mind races as she tries to stay composed, knowing that any sudden movement or raised voice could escalate the situation. She feels the eyes of the crowd on her, the pressure mounting. The K-9 at Officer Matthews' side has become even more agitated, barking louder, straining against the leash as if eager to attack. Matthews finally calls for backup, his voice cold and businesslike, like he's ordering a pizza instead of reinforcements for a routine traffic stop. Tasha's heart sinks further. Backup? For what? She's done nothing wrong. I'm telling you the truth, she says, her voice trembling. But Matthews isn't interested in the truth. His mind is made up, and it's clear that he sees her as a threat, dangerous enough to warrant backup and an attack dog. The dog's growls are becoming fiercer, and it lunges forward, only barely restrained by Matthew's grip on the leash. Panic starts to wash over Tasha like a tidal wave. Her hands shake on the steering wheel, and her heart races faster than ever. But she can't let the panic take over. She has to think of her baby. Her unborn child needs her to stay calm, to stay strong. She takes deep breaths, fighting to keep her composure, but the situation is spiraling out of control. Outside, a small crowd has gathered. People are stopping on the sidewalk, sensing that something isn't right. Some pull out their phones, recording the unfolding scene. Tasha catches glimpses of them in her peripheral vision, but they're a blur. Her focus is on the barking, the officer's growing aggression, and her own desperate need to escape this nightmare unscathed. "You're stalling," Matthews accuses, his voice sharp and venomous. He steps back, reaching for his radio to call in his next move. "We're doing this my way." Suddenly, the K-9 lunges at Tasha's window, barking viciously, claws scraping against the glass. Matthews, fueled by his paranoia and the thrill of control, gives the dog a command, one that pushes everything to the brink of chaos. In a split second, Tasha knows she's out of time. The situation is about to explode, and she can't wait any longer. The dog's barks are deafening, the crowd's murmurs growing louder. Her heart pounds in her chest as fear courses through her body, but she finds a sliver of courage, enough to scream out in desperation. "Wait!" she cries, her voice cutting through the noise like a sharp blade. "You don't know who I am." Her words hang in the air for a moment, as if time itself has paused. Matthews freezes for a split second, the K-9's attack command wavering as he hesitates. The crowd falls silent. The officer's hard expression falters, a flicker of confusion darting across his face. Something in her tone stops him cold, a sudden shift that catches him off guard. Why does her voice hold so much weight? What does she know that he doesn't? Tasha takes a deep breath, feeling the moment of hesitation and knowing it might be her only chance to turn this around. There's something she hasn't revealed, something that changes everything. But does Matthews have any idea what's coming? Tasha, still shaking from the intensity of the moment, knows she has no choice but to reveal her true identity. She takes a deep breath, then slowly reaches into her glove compartment, her movements deliberate and measured. Officer Matthews tenses, his hand hovering near his gun, the K-9 still growling by his side. The crowd watches with bated breath, unsure of what's about to unfold. With trembling fingers, Tasha pulls out a sleek, leather-bound case and flips it open, revealing a gleaming badge that catches the sunlight. She raises it up for everyone to see, especially Matthews. The crowd gasps, and the murmurs of confusion ripple through them as they realize what's happening. Tasha is no ordinary citizen. She's not some random woman on her way to a doctor's appointment. "I'm a federal agent," Tasha declares, her voice steady and commanding now, the fear slowly being replaced with righteous anger. High-ranking, undercover on a sensitive mission. Officer Matthews' face drains of color. The smug authority that had radiated from him moments before is gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unfiltered shock and fear. He stumbles back, his mouth hanging open in disbelief, as though he's just seen a ghost. The leash in his hand goes slack, the K-9 now quiet as if sensing the shift in power. The backup he called for is still en route, but now Matthews wishes he could undo everything. He knows exactly what this means. The onlookers around them, phones still recording, are in stunned silence. Whispers spread through the crowd as they try to process what they've just witnessed. The officer who had seemed so sure of himself just minutes ago is now completely unraveling before their eyes. "You're going to regret this," Tasha says, her voice cold and sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Her words land like a punch to Matthew's gut. His eyes dart from her badge to the faces in the crowd, realizing that every single one of them has captured the entire scene on video. His heart races as he thinks about what's going to happen next. The department, internal affairs, the media, it's all going to come crashing down on him. I didn't know." Matthews stammers, his voice faltering. He takes another step back, his hands shaking now. "I didn't know who you were." "It doesn't matter," Tasha replies, her eyes locked onto his. "You didn't care. You saw a black woman and you assumed the worst. And now, it's going to cost you everything." Matthew's mind races, trying to think of a way out, but there's nothing he can do. The damage is done, and the evidence is overwhelming. His career, his entire life, flashes before his eyes. The weight of the consequences hits him like a ton of bricks. His badge, his uniform, his reputation. It's all about to go up in flames, and there's no one to blame but himself. As sirens wail in the distance, signaling the arrival of backup, Matthews stares at the ground, defeated. The crowd watches in stunned disbelief, their phones still raised, documenting every last moment. There's no escape for him now. Tasha, her badge still in hand, takes one final glance at Matthews before turning her gaze to the onlookers. "Make sure you send those videos to the right people," she says calmly. "This isn't over." The crowd nods in silent agreement, still processing the dramatic turn of events. As the backup cars pull up, Matthews knows one thing for certain. His life will never be the same again. The aftermath of this explosive incident unfolds with lightning speed. The moment the viral footage hits the internet, it spreads like wildfire. Within hours, the video of Officer Matthews confronting Tasha is all over social media, plastered across news outlets, and debated on talk shows. It's not just another case of police overreach. It's a visceral, shocking example of racial profiling and abuse of power. The world watches, horrified, as they see the arrogant officer morph into a terrified man once Tasha reveals her true identity. The public is outraged, and the backlash is fierce. Protests erupt, demanding accountability not just for Matthews, but for a system that allowed someone like him to operate unchecked for so long. People are no longer just focused on the incident itself. They're digging into Matthews' history, and what they uncover is damning. Tasha, though shaken from the ordeal, refuses to be silenced by fear or trauma. She works closely with her department and legal teams to ensure that justice is not just sought but delivered. She becomes the face of a much larger fight, speaking out about what happened and using her platform to expose the systemic failures that nearly cost her her life. In interview after interview, she keeps her head high, her composure unwavering, and her message clear. This wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about a system that enabled him. The investigation into Matthews is launched immediately. Within days, the truth begins to unravel. An internal review reveals what many had suspected but couldn't prove until now. Matthews had a long history of misconduct. From racial profiling to excessive force, his track record was riddled with red flags that had been ignored or swept under the rug. Complaints from civilians, reports from fellow officers. It all surfaces now, and the picture it paints is grim. The police department, now under intense scrutiny, is forced to act swiftly. Officer Matthews is suspended without pay, and as the investigation deepens, his suspension turns into permanent termination. His badge, once a symbol of authority, is revoked in disgrace. But the consequences don't stop there. As more details come to light, Matthews is hit with criminal charges: abuse of power, violation of civil rights, and reckless endangerment. His future, once secure and filled with the privilege of impunity, crumbles before him. For Matthews, this is the end of the line. The man who once believed he was untouchable now faces the reality of his actions. His name becomes synonymous with corruption, a cautionary tale for other officers who might think they can act without consequence. His life, his career, his reputation, it's all gone, swept away in the tide of justice. But for Tasha, the real victory lies not just in the downfall of one corrupt officer. Her survival and bravery exposed the cracks in a much larger system, forcing the public to confront the uncomfortable truth about the deep-rooted issues in law enforcement. The viral footage, the national outrage, and the ensuing reforms all point to one undeniable fact. This moment changed everything. Tasha's true identity, revealed in a split second of desperation, didn't just save her life. It became the catalyst for something bigger. It illuminated the ugly truth that people like Matthews had been hiding in the shadows, protected by the very badge they abused. And now that truth is out in the open for everyone to see. The system is no longer allowed to operate in silence. In the weeks that follow, more officers are investigated, more stories come to light, and reforms are pushed through. It's not easy, and it's far from complete, but a shift has begun. And it's all because Tasha, in that critical moment, found the courage to stand up, to fight back. Not with violence, but with the truth. In the end, justice came for Matthews in the most unexpected way. Tasha reflects in one of her interviews. Sometimes, it's not about fighting fire with fire. It's about making sure the truth sees the light of day. The truth did see the light, and once it did, it was impossible to ignore. Justice, slow as it may seem sometimes, came for Matthews, and when it did, it hit harder than he could have ever imagined.